Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the latest from Ghostbath's Loather out October 29th on Nuclear Blast. This album has 10 tracks, 46 minutes in length, and this is the band's 4th full-length studio album. They are an American atmospheric black metal band. Now this record is the final chapter in the trilogy that started with Moon Lover. Every record had a theme. Moon Lover was tragedy, Star Mourner was ecstasy, and this one is hatred. And you're gonna find it and feel it in the sound, in the lyrics, in the vocals, and therefore in the atmosphere. The moment you press play, this album feels very thick. It has a lot of layers, it has a lot of sound, there's a lot for the listener to digest. So finding the path is not always easy with this record. The path is there, but you kind of have to work through it and discover it, or perhaps rediscover it with every single song, because you will lose yourself within the tracks. Is the intro and the outro of the tracks that allow you to see a little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel and reconnect with the album and prepare yourself for what's coming next. To me, this is a very important point as far as the individual song structure of this record. I'm not necessarily a fan of the overall structure, perhaps that's the weakest spot on the album, but I really love how they constructed these individual songs and how they propel you from track to track and give you those intros and those outros is a little bit of a break, a little bit of a breather for an album that otherwise feels very relentless, very top heavy, an album that just doesn't give you a lot of pauses or a lot of moments to even consider exactly where you are in the overall experience that this record offers. Once you get into the soundscape, this is their heaviest album, at least the heaviest of this trilogy. It just has a lot of sound, it has a lot of layers, like I said. Those layers put together create volume. That volume feels heavy, and everything just allows itself to make it bigger and stronger almost with every passing song. Now there are nuances within the soundscape. The album doesn't feel repetitive at all. The structure also doesn't allow it to be repetitive, but the soundscape changes, morphs, using the same elements song in and song out, just in a different format, with a different ability, coming from a different angle, exposing a different side of the band, a different side of the record. This to me is important from a soundscape perspective because it allows the album to be alive and well on every single song and not start to feel like a little bit flat across a portion of the album or across the entire record. So the soundscape is alive, it has soul, it has heart, but the heart is very dark all the way through. One of the most important elements of that soundscape is the pianos, the keyboards, the synths, all of the keys, if you will. They just play a phenomenal role in the overall experience of the sound and the experience that the soundscape impacts into the atmosphere. I love the fact that they're sprinkled in throughout the record. You see them more in some songs, less in others. They always feel like they're there, but perhaps a hidden layer that's not as noticeable. Sometimes you really have to dig deep in order to discover them. But the way they come in, the way they allow some of the outros of these songs to exist in a very somber way, staying connected with that overall atmosphere, but changing the perception of the record, changing the sound, changing where it's going, really allowing the listener to feel something different while the overall experience becomes unchanged. This to me is a key element on the success of this album. The other element that I really enjoyed was the drums, because they felt like the heartbeat. If you think about this album has a sense of movement. You could feel it, it's palpable on every single track. And just like your heartbeat, when you get excited, it moves a little bit faster, it beats a little bit faster. When you're having perhaps a more introspective moment, it beats a little bit slower. That's exactly how the drums are processed on this album. Depending on the atmosphere of the song and the movement that the song has, the drums will change its beat. Very important to have an album that has a soul already present in the atmosphere that it creates, and then have the heartbeat within the drums. The guitars are also an important element. Not my favorite element of the album because they didn't have a predominant role, at least not from my perspective. I didn't feel like they really drove the experience. But I like the fact that they're able to combine melody and heaviness very well throughout and never really feel like one is fighting against the other. They create some interesting nuances, songs in and song out. They cooperate really well with the drums. They pair up when the song needs to be a little bit heavier, a little bit more direct, a little bit more punchy, if you will, and then pushing in a different blanket and becoming a little bit more melancholic, becoming a little bit more somber, and pairing it a little bit better with what's happening from the keys side of things. So the guitars are kind of going undecided. They don't really know where they want to go and who they want to pair up with, and that creates a little bit of volatility, but volatility that's really important because the overall blanket of this album is one of cohesiveness. Now, as far as vocals goes, though that is something that stays very consistent from start to finish. And the consistency is the consistency of hatred. That message that's present on this album perhaps is better symbolized by how the vocals stay in one format, coming across every single song, always delivering, always feeling the weight of the world on its shoulders, and really transporting the message of the lyrics into the forefront and turning them into reality. That is how the vocals come across. The consistency is outstanding and allows everything to stay connected and allows the songs themselves to stay connected, even though sometimes the overall experience as far as sound goes changes ever so slightly from track to track. So keeping the consistency of the atmosphere alive and keeping the consistency of the vocals together, those two elements are the two pieces of the sandwich, keeping everything else in place, holding them together, allowing the album to be as robust, as interesting as it is. Now, as far as the overall record is concerned, I love this album. From the moment I pressed play, this quickly became my favorite Ghost Bath record. I just love the consistency that it has. I love the nuances that it offers. The keyboards are phenomenal throughout this album. The heaviness, the darkness, the power, the aggression, it just feels so big. It's an album that just has so many things to give to the listener, and it was an album that at first glance I was immediately lost within it, and I never wanted to be found again. I wanted to stay within the experience of listening to this album. I wanted to feel what this album was allowing me to feel, and without feeling anything about it, without worrying about what those feelings were going to be about or what those feelings were going to bring into the outside. So this is an album that gave me a sense of comfort in the negativity and darkness that it has and the atmosphere that it brought from within. Absolutely amazing record all around. The only thing that I would change on this album is I would move I Hope Death Finds Me Well a little bit upper in the overall track listing. Having this song where it is, it feels a little bit disconnected. I would move it one song up. It would make the overall consistency of the record absolutely perfect. Like I said earlier, the overall album structure to me is the only downside of this album, and this song perhaps feels a little bit too deep into the track listing. I would have liked to seen it a little bit earlier on in order to really break the record and really to create an interlude, if you will, within the album, and making the overall experience one that's a little bit smoother and not as thick and not as laborious as this one is. Now, as far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with Sanguine Mask, my favorite track on this record. I love the guitar riff. It's filthy delicious. The somberness that it has, the darkness that it has, how it pairs up with the drums is outstanding. It provides melody, it provides heaviness. The two just work really well with one another. It's almost like inhaling and exhaling. That's how this song feels at times. You inhale and the song feels a little bit calmer. You exhale and the song becomes a little bit darker, a little bit heavier. So I love that sense. The brutality of the vocals really bring the song down. They pull weight down. They really drag this track all the way down, and it's really important because when it becomes a little bit more melodic, it starts to lift up. So you need to have that balance so that the song doesn't become super light and at the same time it doesn't become super heavy. The overall construction is perfect. The melancholy that the song has mixed in with the heaviness really becomes the calling card of the overall track. And as the heaviness starts to shed away, the song becomes more and more melancholic, allowing the piano and strings to come into the forefront. Perhaps a layer that was already there but goes unnoticed because of all the heaviness starts to become more and more predominant as the song finishes. I love this ability to have this growth, this sense of shedding of a skin within a track as you move towards the end. Next you have For It Is a Veil, a song that has a smooth intro and then the sky collapses on it and the song becomes very heavy and very brutal very quickly, musically and vocally. It allows itself to still dip into this sense of despair, into this sense of self-hatred. So it has peaks and valleys. It's a song that reignites itself every so often with some melody building in, and merging that melody with heaviness really allows the song to gain life again. But overall, it's always shifting. This is a track that doesn't stay constant at all. The experience is always one of morphing, of moving, of evolving, of growing, of giving you different looks, of giving you different feels, almost different sound bites and atmospheres from those sound bites within one single song. So there's a lot of volatility in the construction and execution of this track. And then closing it off with a solo, absolutely phenomenal. Not that the solo is incredible, but what the solo does to the overall musicality of the song and what the solo does to the atmosphere of the track, that's where the impact is. Last but not least, Unbearable. Guitar intro is really interesting, then the song grows from that point on, and it at first glance feels uncompromising. Very direct, very brutal, very flat and linear. No peaks, no valleys, just pure aggression and heaviness moving forward towards the listener. That's how it starts, that's how it moves, and that's how you think it's going to stay. It starts to break away a little bit from that mold and becomes a little bit less consistent from that perspective. Adding a piano at the end brings a somber vibe to a song that up until that point was all about hatred, was all about heaviness, was all about darkness. So the atmosphere slightly changes, the mood slightly changes as the song progresses. Like I said, a song that feels very constant for most of its time and then completely goes on a different angle as it reaches the end. Something that's true throughout the entire album. They do that a lot on this record, and in my opinion, that really allows the album to be a little bit easier to navigate and easier to digest for the listener. This is it. Ghost Bat Self-Loader out October 29th on Nuclear Blast. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.